All right, welcome back to the Farmer Rapid Fire here on Real Ag Radio, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. Joining me now is Derwyn Hammond, based out of Brandon, Manitoba. Derwyn, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It is middle of the month. Kind of hard to believe we're halfway through October already. That I love autumn. It's a great time of year, but it also means maybe harvest is wrapping up or has wrapped up, and that means it's time to look ahead to next year. What are you hearing from growers as far as what's top of mind for 2025?
Well, I think, as a debrief and guys have wrapped up, canola yields, I would say overall disappointing this year. Lots of disease pressure in the fields, certainly in this area. Mainly verticillium stripe and sclerotinia, probably the ones coming up most often. Bit of blackleg here and there as well. So, not a big surprise. We had very cool, wet conditions throughout all of June and lots of stress on that crop early. And those wet conditions in June pretty conducive to pretty much all the major diseases that can attack a canola crop. So not a big surprise to see that develop into some fairly high pressure. So,
Yeah.
just talking with guys planning ahead, the genetic traits that we can utilize to help manage that. Those products tended to gravitate to the top of the leaderboard in the trials in the fields where there was that pressure, right? And so it's always weighing that against some other agronomic factors, things like shatter tolerance, maturity, and some of those other things. And, targeting those genetics at those high risk fields heading into next year. What parts of your farm are you in an area that saw lots of pressure and sees pressure year in, year out? I guess the other key thing I'm just coaching guys on is putting the results this year in the context of this year, because it was a pretty extreme year. And, this year might not be a perfect predictor of what we'll see for
That's right.
results in 2025. So, it's important to learn what we can from it, but also don't forget about the previous 2 or 3 years if you've got some experience with products, because that may be more the year we see next year. You never know. So.
Right. What is it? It's something about learning from this year, but not farming this year's weather. Because we cannot necessarily guarantee a repeat, and maybe we don't want a repeat, frankly. You did mention, of course, that some decent yields out there, but some really challenging conditions for some farmers. So some crops maybe did not yield quite as well as we would have liked. What are you hearing on the soybean corn front? How is that looking for your territory?
Certainly, soybeans have been the pleasant surprise. Again, that cool, wet June saw more IDC, iron deficiency chlorosis, hang around in those soybeans for a long time. And they struggled early, but they really came on strong with that warmer weather in July and August and have produced some really strong yields, certainly yields rivaling the canola crop in the area. Lots in that 50 range and beyond. So, as we look at crop rotation as one of the tools that we can maybe work into the mix if we're starting to see some disease pressure in that canola crop more often, that's an opportunity. Corn, another one, lots of rapid growth symptoms early on,
Right.
but grew through it. The ears, kernel count on the ears looks really good, and preliminary yields look pretty strong. So, those crops took advantage of that warm weather later in the season and the open fall that we got to enjoy.
Yes.
So they've taken advantage of it.
Yeah, no, and that's again maybe not something to count on when
Yep.
it doesn't frost till Thanksgiving, but nice when it happens. Now it does, of course. We've talked a bit about planning for next year and keeping track of what fields maybe have certain disease pressures depending on what crop is going in there. What about from the nutrient standpoint? If we perhaps didn't achieve the yields we had planned for or fertilized for, what can we do this fall maybe to inform next season's decisions?
Well, I always feel like I'm beating the same old drum, but I always recommend, that opportunity to do some fall soil testing gives you all winter to the plan for next year in terms of that nutrient program. And this year, you just mentioned some nutrients like nitrogen may be vulnerable to potential loss between now and spring. but other nutrients like phosphorus and potassium, they're pretty stationary in the soil and stick around. And so, those residual levels, maybe that's an opportunity to save some cost heading into next year with a little softer commodity prices. Lots of focus on the cost side of the balance sheet. The other thing this year, lots of shallow root systems because of that wet conditions early on. So making sure you're testing not just that top 6 inch, but the 0 to 6 and 6 to 24 to get a look at what those subsoil levels might look like.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, likely going to be a winter of very sharp pencils, trying to figure out, where you spend your money on your inputs and where you might be able to save a few dollars. Derwyn, when it comes to, we are in sort of prime decision-making time for when it comes to some of these hybrids and seed selection. Does yield always win, or what else should be in the mix there?
Well, I mean, certainly yield is the outcome of all of that combination of your management decisions and the traits that those products carry. But certainly, I think that's the key is again putting it in the context of what do you feel were your big yield limiting factors that were working against those hybrids, and then looking at the trait combinations of those different products. And that's where your local rep can give you a lot of insight into, based on what you feel your limiting factors are, which products might perform the best on those specific acres.
Absolutely. I like that. Yield is the outcome. It's not necessarily a static trait at all. All right. Derwyn Hammond, thank you so much for joining me here on the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you, of course, by Pioneer Seeds Canada.